wanted to touch upon this news that was released by the Los Angeles Times and others just in the last day or two concerning Clay Helton's income. And I want to make the distinction here. His income for fiscal 2017-2018 at $3.2 million versus that not necessarily being his salary, but something close to it because of the way the numbers line up and when he earned an extension to 2023, and that was following the Pac-12 championship run and trip to the Cotton Bowl. So also, I will let you take it from here, Scott, in regards to your thoughts about that would rank him 41st in the nation, which would seem fair. He has one of the top jobs, but he has underperformed to a certain extent, places him right around Chip Kelly territory at $3.3 million, ironically, there at UCLA.
Yeah, I think, when you look at that, and with USC being a private school, we always are a couple years behind on salaries because the only way we get that information is through the federal tax returns. But to me, it's the interesting part is Clay Helton or USC is paying its football coach, around 40th best in the nation, and USC and its fans consider itself to be, I'm sure, one of the top 5 programs in the country. And I believe, 10 years ago, Pete Carroll was probably the top paid coach in the nation when he left for Seattle. So there was a time when USC used to be, the premier place in terms of salaries too. And obviously Clay Helton didn't command that when he was hired, but I also think part of the reason they hired him was they didn't want to have to pay a coach more than 2.5 or 3.2 million. So it's a salary kind of befitting, him or where they stand at the moment. And, if they want to go get Urban Meyer or somebody like that, they're going to really have to pay a lot more money. So you get what you pay for, though, I would say.
Well, Scott, if you, I'm right there with you in what you just outlined. USC would be one of the premier 5 programs in the country, regardless of what the wins and losses say over the last 10 years. If we look at the full picture, and if certainly, as you mentioned, in the same terminology went through my head at the same time. Clay Helton did not command based on his track record. Certainly, he'd not been a head coach at that level to command anything more than that. So there was no reason to pay a Clay Helton, even if he was the next great coach. There was no reason to overpay him going into the job. He had to prove himself, and they thought that he did to a certain extent, at least to give him an extension after a Rose Bowl win and then a Pac-12 championship the next season. But they're in a situation, if they have the mentality that you just outlined, that we want to pay 40th in the country, and I understand it based on this situation, but if that's the mentality going forward, then they're going to have to live with 9-3, 8-4 all the time and not be that elite program anymore. Otherwise, they need to do what you suggest and go out and get one of the top coaches in the country. But I would think the extra $3 million a year is worth competing for and winning conference championships and competing for national championships versus being a 7 to 9 win team every year.
Well, just think back to 2012. They were paying Monty Kiffin, not Lane Kiffin, Monty Kiffin, over $1.5 million to be an assistant. And Ed Ogeron was getting around $1 million. So that was 2.5 just for 2 assistant coaches. Now the head coach is making 3.2. So that shows you, I think, where they are financially speaking. They don't seem to be eager to spend a lot of money. So that's why if they hire a new coach, it's going to be interesting to see, are they really willing to go big? And, you can go through the last 100 years of USC football, and they never have been willing to go big. So they're going to have to really change their history if they do go after Urban Meyer and pay him $10 million or whatever he wants.
I heard a comment the other day by, I believe it was Reggie Bush, and considering he's on the set there at Fox's college football broadcast along with Matt Leinart, that they were going to be actively recruiting Urban Meyer, was the comment that I believe it was Reggie Bush made.
Yeah, and then he backtracked and said he was joking, and
Okay.
Matt Leinart covered for him too, but I don't think there's any doubt. It looked bad because they're undercutting the head coach at USC and they're working for Fox, but so it didn't look good from that point. But I don't think there's any doubt they're going to be recruiting Urban Meyer to go to USC because a lot of alumni, a lot of former players want change. So those guys are no different. So they're going to be advocating to Urban Meyer to take that job too.
And I really have no idea how that's going to play out because Urban Meyer has said his entire life he's an Ohioan, that was the final stop, that was the dream job. And I believe it was, but a few circumstances came into play, obviously his health. But also, I don't know that he was real pleased with the way the university handled his issue with Zach Smith and allowed him to be suspended or suspended him for 3 games. He felt as though he should have been completely exonerated for that. So I think there was some tension there that caused him to say, hey, this is my final year and I'm going to step down. Now we'll see if the health issues are really that prevalent
Right.
or not.
It
Because
sounds to me, I mean, I'm not in Ohio, so I don't know, for sure, but it sounds like it's great for his health not to be coaching football.
yeah,
At the same time, football coaches always want to coach football, so it won't surprise me if he gives it one more go. But probably his family would probably prefer he just continue doing his job at
yes.
Ohio State and go on television. And
Yeah, he has not handled it well in regards to, obviously he's handled the job extremely well, but he's not handled the pressure very well internally. And that was something that he stated a number of times at Ohio State that he learned to do as opposed to his approach at Florida, but apparently not. And you can only change so much. But at 54 years old, with the greatest modern winning percentage in the history of college football and 3 national championships, you would think, wow, uh, to marry him in USC and the location and the brand would be something else.
well, here's the other thing. I'm not totally sure Lynn Swan will be the athletic director in 6 months, so that's probably a plus in terms of hiring Urban Meyer. But we're gonna have to see, like, is Lynn Swan going to be around? And there's people that swear to me he won't be around. So I don't know. I'm sure it would help them if they went and hired a experienced athletic director and did it like other schools, with a real search instead of just having Lynn Swan try to hire somebody on his own. So Urban Meyer might be more impressed if they make a change to athletic director. So that's another thing to monitor in the next few months.
And as you mentioned to me before we started to record, in the Los Angeles Times article outlining the Clay Helton salary situation, Lynn Swan's numbers were not released. It's thought, based on Pat Hayden's previous salary at $2.8 million a few years ago, that Swan may be in the $3 to $4 million range.
Yeah, that's the great irony is, we just talked about how they don't want to pay a football coach and reluctant they are to spend big money. But the athletic director is probably the highest paid athletic director in the nation. And Pat Hayden was, 3 years ago, was the highest paid athletic director in the nation. And now I think Lynn Swan is. And I think they intentionally left his salary off the documents because they knew there was going to be a huge backlash from the fans if they saw how much he really made given his performance. So the next athletic director is not going to make $3 million a year. So there's a new president, and things have changed at USC, in the last year. So they'll save some money when they get rid of Swan. But it just shows you where the things are at the moment, that they can't announce how much his salary is because they know he's already under the gun with everybody, including the media. the depth was the big issue. They obviously look really good at wide receiver. They don't have a lot of depth there, but that's their best position with Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Vaughns as the starting three. So that they're going to be very dependable, I think, as a group there. I think the defensive line I thought looked better than last year, which was good. But the big problems, kind of a repeat from last year, but maybe a little worse. But cornerback is a huge concern. They lost their starters, and they don't really have any experienced guys back. And they're going to bring in about 7 guys in the fall, I guess, to help play that position. So there's no guarantee right now who the starters will be. And in the Pac-12, you got to play 3 guys because you're in a nickel most of the time. So that's a huge concern. And then, even in the last scrimmage, the offensive line didn't look great, which is still a concern. After spring was over, they did get an offensive tackle transfer from Tennessee, which, should help. But it's still Tennessee had like one of the worst offensive lines in the country last year. So I don't know how much one player had to do with that. But the offensive line and the cornerbacks are going to be the big questions next season.
Yeah, you're speaking of Drew Richmond, who was a 5-star. So certainly the evaluation of his talent initially was very high. Again, there's only about 35 or 40 of those guys per season coming out of high school football. He was supposed to not play his first year. He got thrown into action because of injuries, and he's had kind of a spotty performance in regards to his time at Tennessee and has not fulfilled expectations, but he didn't completely collapse and not see the field. He was generally a starter at Tennessee, and like you say, their performance was not good along the offensive line. So there's an addition, but based on talent evaluation, it could be a huge addition, but based on performance, it's a marginal. It's just another guy to have on the roster unless Drew Richmond fulfills his potential that he showed coming out of high school.
I think the pipe they're feeling is he can't be worse than what they have at the moment. So, for 1 year, he's worth taking and giving a scholarship to.